All right. So, starting last week, we started looking at some examples of early Christian artwork. Today, we're going to be discussing some of those works and kind of looking at some of the overarching themes and the cultural influences that sort of shaped this early artwork. So, just for beginning, we are kind of coming out of the Roman Empire. Well, this kind of grows out of the Roman Empire, but I want you guys to see how big the Roman Empire is. So, this is Rome, and this is everything that they have conquered. So, you can see how far it reaches in a relatively short period of time. All right, so this is what is called a catacomb. This is some of the earliest Christian artwork that's been preserved, um, and it's from about 200 CE, or the Common Era. Um, you may have heard AD before. In art history, we refer to it as Common Era. And this artwork was found in these catacombs, which were vast underground cemeteries that were carved out of a type of rock called tufa, just like the early Etruscan tombs had been. This is from the catacomb of Priscilla. It has 8 miles of corridors that are lined with slots to place bodies in. What that means is that just like a tomb, these rectangular pieces would have been where bodies were sealed away. They were sealed with pieces of tile, like you see here. And they were pretty much just for Christian martyrs or for wealthy families. The paintings that are shown here are really similar to the Roman paintings of the time period in the style and technique, but they're different in the content. Now, this is an early ceiling fresco. A fresco is a type of paint where the paint is mixed in with the plaster before it's applied. And plasters, it's sort of like what you use on drywall or something. So it's not something you can really work around with, but it's really good for building into structures. So we're going to see a lot of that through the Renaissance even. This ceiling fresco shows Jesus as the good shepherd. They kind of used Apollo as he was shown a lot of time with the lamb as a way of showing Jesus, because it was symbolic, because Apollo always had his sheep, and it showed that Jesus was a protector of the sheep, leader of the flock. And they really used that to kind of show. So if somebody looked at it, they'd be like, oh, that's Apollo. They wouldn't say, ooh, you're painting pictures of Jesus. Now, you may be thinking, why was painting a picture of Jesus at this time period a big deal? Well, after Jesus's death, about 200 CE, when this was created, Christianity was viewed as illegal. It was like a cult. It wasn't something that was widely accepted. So Christians had to literally go underground, like in these catacombs, to practice and kind of hide their beliefs. So they used Apollo as a symbol for Jesus, and then we have like some exotic animals, so it's like he's in paradise. And then we see that this is in the shape of a cross. We see somebody that looks like is delivering some sort of a sermon down here. But, in this, which is 200, 400 CE, we're seeing Jesus as the leader of the flock, protector of the sheep, and this cross. So think about today, very similar imagery. Here is another depiction of Jesus as the good shepherd. You can look here and tell that this is a very early sculpture of this subject matter. He is very realistic. We have all these typical traits of Roman sculpture. They're just being applied to a different subject matter. He's still very realistic, masterfully rendered. The hair is a little bit stylized, but not really. But this looks like something that we would just look at as ancient Rome and say, all right, yeah, that's a Roman sculpture, where it's sort of bridging the gap from Roman sculpture to Christian artwork. So this time period, we can see how vast Rome is. Now, this we'll get back to the map with one of the next ones. Now, this is the Santa Sabina. This is in Rome, Italy, and it's made from 422 to 432 CE. Now, this artwork really changes very fast because the Roman emperor declares that Christianity is not just legal, but is now the religion, the official religion of Rome. So they have to go about thinking like, okay, well, now Christianity is not only okay, but how can we practice when we haven't been able to practice openly in a long time? So what they do is they repurpose a lot of older buildings. The Santa Sabina, it is the best surviving example of an early Christian basilica. It was adapted by Emperor Constantine's architects to be used as a sacred space. And it was originally a Roman government building that was modified to fit the needs of Christian rituals. So what that means, whenever we look at this, so we have all these arches, which are very Romanesque arches. We have these Roman arches, or Roman columns. They have that fancy Corinthian up top by the arches. So this is very Roman because we have these Greek columns that the Romans adapted with that Greek invention of the arch for added height and less materials. And they have this focal point down here at the altar or apse. Now, in looking at this, we can see there's like this door over here on the side. Well, if you've ever been to a Christian church, you'll know that generally the entrance is at the end. So when you walk in, your eyes are drawn to the apse or altar. The Ave is where people would sit, and then we have the aisles on either side. And we'll talk more about why those aisles are on either side later on, probably next week, because eventually that does serve a real purpose other than just having more space to try to walk to get to your seat. So originally, the entrance was over here, but that is not how it works in a Christian church. You don't just have an entrance on the side. So they've moved the entrance down here so that when you first walk in, your eyes are drawn to the apse or the altar. They adapted these buildings because they were already standing. It provided a large, well-lit interior space for people to congregate. It created a clear focal point to the altar in the apse. And the Roman basilica's function was as a law court, serving the law and justice. That correlates with the belief in the Last Judgment of Christianity. Now, one of the things that I asked you about is kind of comparing what it looked like on the outside versus the inside. So whenever you look at this building, it's brown, it's plain. There's not a lot of exterior decoration, especially if you think about some of these Roman buildings that we looked at that had these very elaborate and intense decorated exteriors. But then when you go inside, we have these fancy columns, all these details on the walls. We have these murals all over this building. Now, this is supposed to believe that, or this is supposed to kind of mirror the belief that Christians viewed what was on the inside as important rather than what's on the outside. So that is the reason that these buildings were left intentionally plain at this point, where they were trying to mirror that tenet of Christianity. Now, the inside, it is very bright. It has all these windows. This top row up here is what's called the clerestory. And then there are even more windows in the apse to let in all this light. Originally, the walls were decorated with mosaics. So there wasn't stained glass just yet. But if these were still covered in the mosaics, the light would hit them and they would sort of, all those different pieces of glass and rock would sort of shine from that. So it's kind of that same idea. Now, the other thing that I had you guys look at was this depiction of Justinian and his attendants. Now, Justinian was a later emperor of Rome. But as you can tell, if you kind of think back to the Roman paintings that we've seen, this looks vastly different. There's a lot going on here. Now, first of all, if we see this circle around Justinian's head, that indicates that he is holy. So this is sort of like a halo. This is how those early halos are shown on two-dimensional works. He is dressed in purple, which, yes, we have to accept that this is purple. It's just the quality of the picture. Purple showed royalty. So we can see that these guys were pretty royal too. Some of the royal guard. We have some early religious figures. We have a priest. We have somebody holding an early version of the Bible. And then we have his warriors. Now, a few things are really different here. First off, these do not have accurate proportions of hardly anything. Yes, they're people, but looking back at what Romans had been able to accomplish, they're vastly different because there's not this attention paid to proportions of the face or of the bodies. These almost look like the robes are just like sort of floating on hangers. They don't look like they have real form underneath them. Their feet kind of have like this gold tint around them, which almost makes them look like they're floating. They don't have like these realistic cast shadows, and their feet are kind of all doing the same thing. So I want to kind of go back to the map here. So originally, Rome's in Italy, kind of expands out from this. Well, Justinian ends up moving, I believe it's Justinian, one of the emperors ends up moving the capital of Rome over here, and I can't find where they moved that capital to. But if you look at this area of the world, this is like Turkey. This is the Middle East over here. So they were Christians at this point, but they also had this these long-standing traditions, like not showing realistic depictions of people, kind of more focused on design and geometric pattern than focusing on realism. So that starts to kind of inch its way in to Christian artwork at this time, because no longer are we kind of going with those standard Roman traditions of depicting people realistically, but they're sort of intentionally showing them unrealistically to try to make them look otherworldly and to try not to show them of as this world. Because if they looked of like they were from this world, they thought that that would make them look less holy than they were. So they wanted themselves to look less realistic or stylized, so that they would look like they were from another plane almost. So we're starting to see this real shift from secular artworks to religious artworks and how that's changing it. So they're changing their buildings to make them fit into this Christian model of a church, and they're changing their style of paintings and mosaics. And this is actually a mosaic, like the Alexander mosaic. It's made from those little bitty pieces of glass. And we'll look at the building that this is in on our next video. So there's this big shift from Rome to Christian Rome, and we're going to kind of keep moving that path as we go forward up to the Renaissance. Make sure to do the assignment on Schoology. Since this is a longer video, it will be for today and tomorrow's assignment. So if y'all need any questions or need any help, I'll be here if you need me.